The Witherspoon brothers' new necromancer show, The Blood Realm, copyrighted by DarkWood Manor Productions, all rights reserved. Written by Lewis Brown, edited by Heather Good. Salutations, faithful audience. Luther Witherspoon here to invite you to our new and vastly more exciting necromancer show. I know we have not been around for quite some time, and that our last performance, 13 seasons past, was somewhat of a disaster. Vosculus, the queen of all vampires, managed to free herself from the tomb in which she was imprisoned within our show. Her psychic powers weakened my control and influence over the other vampires on display. During the ensuing mayhem, Vosculus fled, but my brother Eugene and I were able to retake control of the other vampires, though not before they dispatched some of our fine patrons. After centuries of imprisonment, Vosculus was once again free to drain our world and create more blood-sucking vampires. Eugene and I felt it was our duty to track her down and destroy her once and for all. So we closed the doors on our necromancer show and set out on our quest. I can't begin to tell you of all the places my brother and I traveled over the years in our search, or of all the vampires we encountered in our travels. However, much to our chagrin, we were never able to find Vosculus. She is a very ancient and cunning creature who obviously appreciates the threat that my necromancy and alchemy skills pose to her. She must have gone deep underground. However, we know that even though she is in hiding, her presence has already tainted our world. A particularly unfortunate side effect for my dear brother Eugene and me has been the discovery that our powers in this world are substantially diminished. Our control over the undead has shrunk to a fraction of the strength it was at the height of our necromancer show. This is the harsh reality that we have come to terms with over the years. Our search for Vosculus had become a pointless and futile exercise. For all we knew, she may have left this world and returned to where she originated. Apart from our somewhat flaccid abilities, we could find no signs of her presence or influence after over a decade of scouring the globe. Over those long years, we made a meager living off terminating errant vampires for paying customers. However, in our hearts, Eugene and I are showmen. We long for the footlights and to entertain crowds with supernatural wonders and frights. We dreamed of restarting our necromancer show, but with our diminished power to control the fiends, it would have been a foolhardy venture at best. We did not want to endanger audiences unnecessarily, and that is what we would have done if we had tried to restore the Witherspoon brothers' necromancer show with our weakened powers. It was a little over 2 years ago, well after we had accepted our fate, that we received a request for our services in Damascus. Some archaeologists of our acquaintance had come upon a nest of the undead in the Damascus underground. With all due haste, we made for Damascus. Once arriving in the ancient city, we sought out the encampment of the archaeological team that had summoned us. We soon found it. It was just north of the city in the underground ruins of Kabesh. Unfortunately, we were too late to help the scholarly men. Their camp had been ransacked. The only signs of them were the fresh bloodstains in the dirt. Eugene and I are not ones to leave a job unfinished, despite the ones that hired us being killed before they could pay us. So we set off to explore the ruins in search of the vampires that had robbed us of our pittance. Our senses are quite keen when it comes to seeking out the living dead, and it wasn't long before we found our quarry. Near an underground antediluvian temple we were set upon by a pack of Nosferatu. It was a savage variety of the beasts that I had never encountered before. There was at least a dozen or more of the fiends. Eugene immediately started defending our position with his automatic blunderbuss. The shots echoed loudly in the underground space as the numbers of attacking Nosferatu were depleted. With some effort, I was able to bring the remaining fiends under control with my necromancy. Once I was able to probe their minds, I realized that these creatures were just mere foot soldiers. They served a greater master who was located inside the temple. Once Eugene had recovered from the excitement, we ventured forth into the temple with our new vampiric slaves in tow. I suspected we'd find some master vampire who was trying to set himself up as a god in this crumbled underground kingdom, or perhaps an ancient and far sharper Nosferatu that was controlling his lessers. Neither was the case. I must to admit that when we managed to get to the inner sanctum and open the doors, I was shocked at what we saw. Inside the large hall was a science and technology lab. There were gizmos and techno-contrivances, the likes of which I hadn't seen since first stepping foot into Victor von Frankenstein's lab over 2 centuries ago. This was not the lair of an ordinary bloodsucker. This was the lab of an intelligent creature of science. Then, I found the owner of this scientific cathedral. His bulbous and wizened head was poked inside one of his contraptions. Once he realized that my brother and I, flanked by his former servants, were standing only a few feet away, he jumped back and spun toward us. Almost faster than the eye could perceive, he grabbed a sharp, hook-like blade and lunged at me. My brother's lightning reflex caught the vampire with a karate kick to his midriff, sending him backwards against his machine. Despite appearing old, the kick barely fazed him, and he was once again on his feet and coming at us. However, it had given me enough time to effortlessly take control of his mind. This was also quite surprising, given the weakened state of my powers since the rise of Vosculus. It did not take long before I was able to discern exactly what was going on there beneath ancient Damascus. First, the identity of our new vampire friend was Klaproth. He was a creature that I had heard stories of, but never thought they were true. Decades ago, before he became a vampire, Mr. Klaproth was a highly educated and devoted man of science. Legend tells that when Klaproth was infected with vampire blood, he physically transformed into what we call a Nosferatu-type vampire, but he was able to maintain his grasp on his genius mind. He continued to pursue his experimentation in seclusion, only drinking enough blood to keep himself alive. He is a most odd blood-sucking fiend for sure. As for his work in the Damascus underground, well, that is where this becomes very interesting. We discovered that old Klaproth had been working on, and nearly completed, an interdimensional transporter. Over decades, he had created a way to travel between our world and a world adjacent to ours, where things are quite different. It was a world overrun by vampires. Klaproth wanted to travel to other worlds as well, but his machine would only transport him between our world and the world he rightfully named the Blood Realm. Being natural-born explorers, Eugene and I could not pass up the opportunity to explore this other world. With the help of a now very compliant Klaproth, we took countless excursions into the Blood Realm. We quickly discovered that it was indeed overrun by vampires, and the society there had not progressed much past what our society was in the 19th century. It seems that in this realm, the powers of magic, alchemy, and even necromancy had never been discovered. All the powers that kept vampires under control in our world were missing from the Blood Realm. This gave us a tremendous advantage, because our use of necromancy was very effective on the vampires we encountered. Our powers were at full strength, or perhaps more in that world. This filled Eugene and I with hope and excitement. It gave us a way to get past our weakened abilities due to Vosculus, and to get back into show business. With the help of Klaproth and his interdimensional transporter, the Witherspoon brothers can now offer our faithful patrons safaris into the Blood Realm. So join us this October at DarkWood Manor, and let us transport you to a world of vampires. We guarantee an exciting adventure that is 100% safe thanks to the renewed powers of the Witherspoon brothers' necromancer show. Of course, I won't send you to a whole new world without letting you know about some of the vampires you will be encountering there. For the most part, vampires in the Blood Realm are the same as the vampires in our reality. The curse of vampiric blood works just the same. It turns people into a variety of undead bloodsuckers, producing both zombie-like half-deads and a vast array of other vampiric creatures. If you are familiar with the previous incarnation of our vampire show, you will already recognize some of the vampires you will be seeing there. However, there are a number of unique characters and types of vampires you will be encountering in the Blood Realm. The Keen. The Keen are one of the strangest types of vampires I have encountered in any reality. They are very much like the scimitar, in that they infest a location like cockroaches and stick to the shadows. They are more inclined to feed on their victims for as long as they can, rather than kill them outright. If someone they are feeding upon does die, then they mourn the victim by wailing like a banshee. They all cultishly adorn themselves with white veils and crowns of black roses. I've never seen vampires suffer so much remorse for what they are and what they do. Regardless, they are just as deadly as ones that feel nothing. Lenore Poe, the Raven. They say that love and the power of a creative mind are two of the strongest powers man has at his disposal. I can only assume that is what led to the strange case of Lenore Poe and her hapless lover Edgar Allan. As you may be aware, Poe died in our reality in 1849 of mysterious reasons. The Poe of the Blood Realm also died in 1849, but the reasons there are not so mysterious. Or should I say, they are not mysterious to me. In the Blood Realm, Poe's wife Lenore died in 1847. Her death was at the hands of a vampire known as Reynolds. Reynolds is a subject of some interest that I will discuss later. Lenore became a vampire, a fact which Edgar hid from the world as he allowed his bride to feed upon him. In the end, Edgar tried to flee from the sanguineous slavery to his love Lenore. Unfortunately, he could not escape their enduring love. Edgar was given her eternal kiss in 1849. But as I have mentioned before, the vampiric blood is a fickle thing. Edgar became a half-dead. As all half-deads, he was fated to slowly turn to dust. Lenore's love for him refused to give in to his passing, though, and she has kept him alive by continuously draining him of blood and feeding him hers. I learned all this via my necromantic ability to probe the minds of the undead. I saw that for nearly 2 centuries, the great writer was tormented by his love. And over those many years, as Poe longed for release, Lenore's vampiric form became more and more like the raven of Poe's famous poem. These sanguine lovers are on display in the Witherspoon brothers' all-new necromancer show. Rasputin, the Unholy. The Rasputin of the Blood Realm is even more infamous than the one in our reality. He was a vampire when he arrived at the Russian royal court in 1905. For over a decade, he fed upon the royal family, under the pretense of being their advisor. Once he was found out by Russian nobility, he faked his own death to save himself from a real one. He remained under the radar for another 30 years until he turned up in Romania. He established a vampiric church in a mountain village. During World War II in the Blood Realm, Rasputin and his flock of Nosferatu vampires aided the Nazi war effort. After the war, the Allied forces burned his Romanian church, but Rasputin was never found. Once I learned of his existence in the Blood Realm, I had to have him for my new show. So my brother and I dug him up, so to speak. Now, he and his followers are on display in our new show, The Candiru. As I've stated in the past, I do not know why the powers of the vampiric blood affect different people differently, or how it may affect non-human life forms. This was made even more evident to me when I encountered the Candiru in the Blood Realm. The best way to describe the Candiru is that they are semi-aquatic humanoid vampiric fish creatures. One might just mistake them for some strange new species, apart from the fact they feed on the blood of the living, and I can control them with necromancy, which means they are in the undead creature column. Like many other Nosferatu types, they usually end up serving other mentally stronger vampires. Carmilla Karnstein, the Countess. Carmilla Karnstein is one of the most refined monsters I've had the pleasure of having under my spell. She refers to herself as a countess, but she acts more like a queen. She has many lesser vampires to serve her, and half-deads do her bidding as well. Her cat-like pomp and her fervent lust for blood makes her quite the character in our show. The Vanquished. The Blood Realm is an odd place. Even though many of the same people and creatures that exist in our reality also reside there, the two realities are far different. In the Blood Realm, the vampire menace was never dealt with as it was in our world. They never had the chance to develop the magical defense of necromancy. However, in several of their cities, some vampires have been driven underground by more conventional means. They are usually younger vampires that lack the ability to hide themselves within human society. These vampires are referred to as the Vanquished. This gang of vampiric hooligans feeds on those that stray into the wrong places after dark. I have corralled some of these delinquent fiends inside the Blood Realm for your viewing pleasure. Tezcatar, the Queen in Stone. As I stated earlier, I do not know what became of my foil, Vosculus, in our reality. However, I'm not foolish enough to believe the Blood Realm does not also have a progenitor of vampire kind of its own. Knowing that our endeavors would not be safe in the vampiric dimension until I had addressed the Vosculus issue in that realm, I sought her out. Luckily enough for me, the ancient Aztec had dealt with the vampire queen untold centuries ago. They were perhaps the first and last of the magic users of the Blood Realm. And when confronted with the horror of the mother of all vampires, they were able to curtail her powers via a spell. They turned her skin to stone, which had a dampening effect on her powers, and they sealed her inside a temple dedicated to their god Tezcatlipoca. They made sacrifices to their god by feeding her victims. She came to be known as Tezcatar. Her and the cult that formed around her was the only remaining part of the Aztec culture that remains in the Blood Realm. Needless to say, in her accursed state, she had far less power than her doppelganger in our reality. I was able to bring her under my control and into the new necromancer show. Dr. Reynolds, the Bloodletter. Given the twisted nature of the Blood Realm, lots of bizarre societal differences can be found there. I mentioned earlier that a vampire known as Reynolds was responsible for the undeath of Lenore Poe. It is also my sincere belief that this Reynolds is the doppelganger of the vampire known as Jack the Ripper in our reality. In the Blood Realm, however, he took his passions in a different direction. He was a doctor. A small community in Virginia allowed this bloodsucker to set up an asylum. In return for allowing the doctor to experiment on the lunatics brought to the asylum, he promised to figure out the vampiric ability of immortality without the curse of vampirism and bestow it upon the rich benefactors that funded his asylum. The asylum became a sadistic torture chamber of humans, the undead, and the half-dead alike. I put a stop to his predation on humans, but let him continue his experiments on his fellow bloodletters. You can witness these strange experiments in safety in the Blood Realm. Nikola Tesla, the Shocker. In our world, Nikola Tesla was an absolute genius. However, he tragically died in destitution in 1943. In the Blood Realm he lives on, as a vampire. Now, I'm not a man to ever sing the praises of any bloodsucker, but the vampire Tesla is every bit of the genius that he was in our reality. He continues to be a master of electrical invention in the Blood Realm. He has established an astonishing lab in the primitive Blood Realm, and his comprehension of the workings of electricity is beyond brilliant. As you may recall from our reality, Tesla's rival, Thomas Edison, stole most of his fame. Well, the Tesla of the Blood Realm has set this wrong to right with a little poetic justice. The half-dead Edison of the Blood Realm serves as Tesla's assistant and guinea pig. They make quite the entertaining duo, and they are waiting for you in our show. Mercy Brown, the Grave Stalker. Some vampires can't escape the allure of the grave. It is not unusual to find certain Nosferatu-type vampires making graveyards their home, but it is strange to find the more human-appearing ones doing so. I refer to this type of fiend as a grave stalker. These types of vampires will actually share the graves of the newly deceased to shelter from the sunlight. They inevitably end up feeding on the loved ones of the deceased person they have become roommates with. This makes the locals believe the newly deceased person is the vampire, and they dig them up to dispatch them. All the graveside activity is exactly what the grave stalker and its fledglings want. A feeding frenzy ensues. The most notorious of the grave stalkers that plagued the New England region of the United States in the Blood Realm was named Mercy Brown. She traveled the region from graveyard to graveyard spreading her plague, unfettered by the locals that tried to kill her again and again. Once I learned of her, I knew she would make a great addition to our show, so I took her under my control. I left the New Englanders singing my praises. Now you can see Mercy stalk the graveyard in our necromancer show. That is all I have to relay to you for now. The next step in this journey is yours, dear patron. Join us this October at DarkWood Manor, and let us, the Witherspoon brothers, transport you to the fantastical and frightening Blood Realm.